The first time I tried to rent an apartment, I was 19 years old. I had saved $800 from working double shifts at a diner where the grease smelled like it had been there since the Reagan administration. I had a reference letter from my manager, a man named Tony who chewed cigars he never lit, and who wrote that I was reliable and punctual in block letters that looked like a child's handwriting. I had a deposit. I had hope. The landlord ran my credit while I sat in his office, trying not to sweat through the only blazer I owned, navy blue, thrifted, missing a button. I watched his face change. Not anger, not suspicion. Just the weary resignation of a man who had seen this before. "You got a 420 credit score," he said. 3 collections, 2 charge-offs, a personal loan in default. I stared at him. "That can't be right. I don't have any credit cards. I don't have any loans." He turned the monitor toward me. There they were, 3 credit cards, 1 personal loan. All opened 14 months ago when I was 17. All with my name, my social security number, my address. All maxed out, defaulted, sent to collection agencies that had been calling my mother's house for a year while I was away at my first and only semester of college. I called my father from the parking lot. He answered on the second ring. His voice warm and busy, the voice of a man who was always in the middle of something important. "Jade, how's my girl, Dad?" I said, and my voice was shaking. "There's credit cards in my name. A loan. I just tried to rent an apartment and they said I owe $4,000 to $7,000. A pause, the sound of him taking a sip of something. Then, "Oh, that. Yeah, I needed to help the family through a rough patch. The business was slow, you know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I didn't know anything about his business except that he sold used cars and talked about moving units. I didn't know that helping the family meant using my clean financial identity as collateral for his debts. "You used my social security number?" I asked. "I'm 17. I was 17 when you did this. You're the oldest, Jade. You always stepped up. That's what family does." Another sip. "Don't worry about it. You'll pay it off. Builds character." "Gotta go, kiddo." "Love you." He hung up. I stood in the parking lot of a strip mall in a town I hated, holding a phone that suddenly felt like a weapon that had been used against me, and I understood that I was not a daughter to him. I was a resource, a line of credit with a heartbeat. I walked back to the diner. I asked Tony for more hours. He gave them to me. I didn't try to rent again for 6 years. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're here, maybe you know what it means to have your own name used against you. Maybe someone who was supposed to protect you treated you like an asset instead of a person. If this is your first time, hit that subscribe button. We tell stories here about women who learn the language of the systems that trap them, and who use that language to set themselves free. Here's my story. Here's my story. I was born Jade Marie Patterson on a Tuesday in March, the first child of Robert and Linda Patterson. My mother died when I was 4, an aneurysm, sudden and complete, like a light switch being flipped, and my father remarried twice before I turned 12. Neither marriage lasted, but the house stayed full of women who left and women who arrived, and I learned early that my job was to be useful. To babysit, to clean, to stay out of the way and make myself small enough to fit in the gaps. My grandfather, my mother's father, was the only person who saw me. His name was Arthur, and he was a mechanic who had saved every dollar he ever made in a coffee can under his workbench until he had enough to open his own shop. He taught me to balance a checkbook when I was 9. He taught me that credit was a tool, not a gift, and that the only person who should ever sign your name is you. He died when I was 16, and he left me $40,000 in a trust that was supposed to be released when I turned 18. I never saw that money. My father told me the trust had complications. Legal fees, taxes. "It's tied up, Jade. I'll handle it." I believed him because I was 16 and grieving, and because he was my father and fathers were supposed to handle things. He handled it all right. He handled it right into his own pocket, along with my financial identity, my future, and the next 12 years of my life. The debt wasn't just numbers. It was a cage built from my own name. I couldn't rent an apartment because my credit was radioactive. I couldn't get a car loan, so I took the bus to work in rain and snow and heat that made the vinyl seats stick to my thighs. I couldn't finish college because I couldn't qualify for student loans, and even if I could, I was working 60 hours a week to pay minimums on debts I never incurred, to collection agencies that didn't care whose signature was on the application. I worked at the diner until I was 22. Then I got a job as a night auditor at a hotel, sitting in a fluorescent-lit lobby from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., entering numbers into a computer while the world slept. I taught myself accounting from library books and free online courses. I got a certification. I got a job as a bookkeeper for a construction company, then a better job at a medical practice, then finally, at 29, a position as a junior accountant at a firm downtown. By then my credit was still wrecked, but I had learned to live without it. I rented rooms in other people's houses, paid in cash, kept my head down. I had no car, no vacations, no savings. Every extra dollar went to the debt, which never seemed to shrink because the interest was a hungry thing that ate faster than I could feed it. And my father, he sold his car lot for a profit. He bought a house with a pool in a subdivision where the lawns were manicured by services he paid for. He took vacations to Florida and posted photos on Facebook, golf courses, sunsets, steaks the size of my paycheck. He retired at 62 with a pension and a smile, and he sent me a text the day he left the office for the last time, finally free. Proud of you too, kiddo. Love, Dad. I stared at that text for an hour. I was 31, living in a room above a garage, and I had never been free a day in my life because of him. And he was proud of me. Something in me shifted that day, not anger. Anger had burned out years ago, replaced by the dull ache of exhaustion. This was something colder, something that felt like clarity. I was an accountant now. I had access to records. I had training. I had patience. And I had a memory, the memory of my grandfather's face, grease-stained and serious, telling me, "Your name is the only thing you truly own, Jade. Don't let anyone else sign it." I decided to find out exactly what my father had signed in my name, and what he had signed in his. The discovery didn't come all at once. It came like a ledger, line by line, entry by entry, each one adding up to a picture I had been too broken to see. It started with the trust. I requested the records from the law firm that had handled my grandfather's estate. They were reluctant. "Your father handled the distribution, Miss Patterson," but I was persistent. I sent formal letters. I cited state probate codes. I made myself annoying enough that a paralegal finally sent me a PDF of the disbursement records. The trust had been $80,000, not $40,000. 80. It was supposed to be split between me and my two cousins, Arthur's other grandchildren, but the records showed a single disbursement, $80,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, opened in my father's name, 6 months after my grandfather died. I called my cousin Marcus. He was a teacher in Baltimore, a gentle man who remembered my grandfather's shop the same way I did, the smell of motor oil, the jar of butterscotch candies on the counter, the way Arthur would let us help change oil even though we mostly just got in the way. "Did you ever get your inheritance?" I asked. A pause. "No, Dad said Grandpa Arthur didn't leave much, just enough to cover funeral expenses." "Why?" I told him. The silence on the other end of the line was so complete I thought we'd been disconnected. "Then he stole from all of us." "He stole from all of us," I confirmed. "And that's not all. The credit cards were next." I pulled my full credit report, something I had avoided for years because looking at it felt like staring at a wound that wouldn't heal. 3 cards, all opened when I was 17. One with a limit of $15,000, maxed out within 3 months. Another at $12,000. A third at $8,000. The personal loan was for $12,000. The total was $47,000, plus interest and penalties that had bloated it to nearly $60,000 by the time I was 25. But here was the thing I had never noticed, the thing that my accounting training finally let me see. The minimum payments had been made for the first 2 years. Not by me. I had never touched these accounts. But someone had been paying just enough to keep them alive, to keep the interest growing, to keep me on the hook without ever paying them off. My father had used my credit to float his business. He had made the minimums to keep the accounts from defaulting immediately, then stopped when he sold the lot and no longer needed them. He had fed me to the debt machine and walked away clean. I sat with this information for 3 days. I didn't eat much. I didn't sleep. I just sat in my rented room above the garage and I looked at the numbers. And I realized that my father had not just stolen my money and my credit. He had stolen my time, my 20s, my education, my relationships, the apartment I never had, the car I never drove, the sleep I never slept. He had monetized my existence, and he had done it with a smile and a "love you, kiddo." I could have gone to the police. Identity theft is a crime. But the cards were opened when I was 17, and he was my legal guardian. And the statute of limitations was murky. And I knew with the certainty of someone who had watched the system fail her for 12 years, that a small-town police department would not prioritize the financial abuse of a daughter by her father. They would call it a family matter. They would suggest mediation. They would do nothing, so I chose a different system. One that didn't care about family. One that only cared about numbers. The IRS. I didn't act immediately. I spent 4 months building a file. I worked late at the firm, using my access to public records and tax databases, legally, carefully, never crossing the line into anything that could be called hacking. I was an accountant. I followed the paper trail the way my grandfather had taught me to follow an engine leak, methodically, patiently, until you found the source. My father had not reported the $80,000 trust disbursement as income. He had not reported the offshore account. He had claimed business losses on his car lot for 3 years that didn't match the sales records. He had deducted personal expenses, the pool, the vacations, the golf club membership as business costs. The total tax evasion, by my calculations, was somewhere between $180,000 and $220,000 over 15 years. I found the credit card statements too. He had kept them in a box in his basement, which I accessed by visiting for Thanksgiving and excusing myself to the bathroom, then taking a detour. The statements showed purchases at home improvement stores, car part suppliers, restaurants where he entertained clients, all on my credit, all deducted as business expenses, all never reported as income to me because he had never intended to pay them back. I made copies, I scanned them. I organized them by date, by account, by tax year. I built a spreadsheet so thorough it would have made my grandfather cry with pride. And then I filled out Form 3949A. It's a simple form, really, information referral. You can download it from the IRS website. It asks for the name of the person you're reporting, their social security number, the nature of the violation, and any supporting documentation. You sign it, you mail it, and then you wait. I mailed it on a Monday in February. I didn't tell anyone, not Marcus, not my roommate, not the therapist I had finally been able to afford after getting a raise that didn't immediately go to debt. I mailed it, and I went back to work, and I waited. The family reunion was my father's idea. A retirement celebration, he called it. 62 years young, and I'm finally living the dream. The invitation arrived in my email with a gif of a cartoon man dancing on a beach. It was scheduled for June at a banquet hall in his subdivision, catered by a barbecue place he liked. No gifts, the invitation said. Just your presence. I RSVP'd yes. I bought a dress, black, professional, the kind of thing you wear to a deposition rather than a party. I rented a car for the day, the first time I'd driven in 3 years. I practiced my breathing in the parking lot. The hall was full of people I hadn't seen in years. Cousins who had believed I was bad with money. Aunts who had clucked their tongues when I dropped out of college. My stepmother, wife number 3, who had once told me that responsible people pay their debts while wearing shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. My father was at the center of it all, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and a retirement hat shaped like a palm tree. He hugged me when I arrived, smelling of cologne and self-congratulation. "Jade, there's my girl, still crunching numbers, I said. "Actually, I brought a presentation. For the party." His face lit up. He loved presentations. He loved being the center of attention. "A slideshow? Oh, you shouldn't have." "It's not a slideshow," I said. "It's a ledger." I walked to the front of the room. I had arranged with the venue manager the day before a polite email, a small fee, a request to use the projector for a family tribute. He had been happy to help. I connected my laptop. The projector hummed to life. The room went quiet, the way rooms do when someone stands in front of them with a remote control and a look that says this is not going to be what you expected. "Hi everyone," I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this in front of my bathroom mirror for 3 weeks. Most of you haven't seen me in a while. There's a reason for that. I've been busy paying off debts that weren't mine. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. My credit report, the 3 cards, the loan, the $47,000 in debt opened when I was 17. These accounts were opened by my father, Robert Patterson, using my social security number. I was a minor. I had no income. I had no idea they existed until I tried to rent my first apartment and discovered my credit was destroyed. I clicked again. A scan of the credit card application. The signature was clearly his. I had compared it to his signature on the trust documents, on his tax filings, on the mortgage for his pool house. I spent 12 years working double shifts to pay minimums on these debts. I couldn't finish college. I couldn't buy a car. I couldn't rent an apartment. I lived in other people's garages while my father lived here. The next slide, a photo of his house with the pool, and deducted his vacations as business expenses. The room was very quiet now. I could hear the air conditioning. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and slow, the heartbeat of a woman who had rehearsed this moment until it felt like a performance she had already given. "That's not all," I said. "My grandfather, Arthur Brennan, left $80,000 in trust for his grandchildren. It was supposed to be split 3 ways. Instead, the next slide, the offshore account records. It was deposited into a single account in the Cayman Islands, opened by Robert Patterson. My cousins never saw a dime, I never saw a dime, but Dad saw a lot of dimes. He saw enough to buy this house, this retirement, this life." I looked at my father. He was standing near the cake, his palm tree hat slightly askew, his face the color of old ash. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't say you were helping the family. Don't say I should be grateful. Don't say love you, kiddo. I've heard all of it. I've lived all of it, and I'm done." The final slide. A scan of Form 3949A, the information referral to the IRS dated 3 months ago. "I didn't go to the police," I said. "I didn't need to. The IRS has its own way of handling things. They don't care if you're family. They only care if the numbers add up." And Dad, I looked at him, and I felt nothing, not even victory, just the vast empty space where anger used to live. "Your numbers don't add up." I closed the laptop. I walked to the door. The room was frozen, a tableau of relatives caught between shock and the dawning realization that they had been wrong about me for 12 years. I didn't look at them. I didn't need their validation. I had stopped needing that a long time ago. My father called out as I reached the door. "Jade, Jade, please. We can talk about this. I can explain." I turned. "You had 12 years to explain. You had 12 years to fix it. You chose the pool instead. Enjoy the audit." I walked out. I got in my rented car. I drove back to the city, and for the first time in 12 years, I felt like I was driving towards something instead of away from it. The IRS moved slowly, but they moved. 6 months after the party, my father received a notice of deficiency. His assets were frozen pending investigation. The offshore account was flagged. The deductions were disallowed. The penalties and back taxes totaled more than $300,000, more than his house was worth, more than his pension could cover. He tried to sell the house. He couldn't, the lien made it unsellable. He tried to access his retirement accounts. They were garnished. He called me 3 times. I didn't answer. The 4th time, he left a voicemail. "Jade, I'm your father. Please, I made mistakes. I need your help." I deleted it, not with satisfaction. With the same indifference I would feel toward a spam email offering a loan I didn't need. The cousins got their money. The IRS recovered enough from the offshore account to distribute the trust, plus interest, to Marcus and his sister and me. It wasn't enough to erase the years, but it was enough to pay off the remaining debt, to put a down payment on a small apartment, to buy a car that actually started when I turned the key, and it was enough to start something else. The Jade Ledger opened a year later. It's a non-profit, small but growing, based in a storefront office near the community college I never got to finish. We help young people, mostly 18 to 25, who have been victims of familial identity theft. We help them pull their credit reports, dispute fraudulent accounts, file police reports if they want to, navigate the bureaucracy of credit bureaus and collection agencies. We teach them that their name is theirs, that their social security number is not a gift to be given away, that the people who claim to love them do not have the right to sign for them. I hired a lawyer who works pro bono. I hired a counselor who specializes in financial trauma. I hired Marcus's sister, who is a social worker, to run outreach. We don't have a pool. We have a waiting room with secondhand chairs and a coffee maker that drips. But we have something my father never had: integrity. He called me once more after the IRS had taken everything. His number showed up on my phone and I almost didn't answer. But I did. I wanted to hear what he would say. "Jade," he said. His voice was different. Smaller. The voice of a man who had finally encountered a system he couldn't charm or evade. "I don't have anything left. The house. The pension, it's all gone. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I wanted to ask if you could forgive me." I held the phone to my ear. I looked out the window of my office at the street below, at the young people coming in for appointments, at the sign on the door that said the Jade Ledger in letters I had designed myself. I thought about my grandfather's shop, the grease stains, the butterscotch candies. The way he had looked at me when I was 9 and had balanced my first checkbook, like I was capable of anything. "Do you know what Grandpa Arthur used to say?" I asked. My father was quiet. "No," he said, "your name is the only thing you truly own. You stole mine for 12 years, you used it to build a life I couldn't have, and now you want me to give you something else, my forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't mine to give you, it's mine to keep, and I'm keeping it." I hung up. I didn't block his number. I didn't need to. He never called again. I finished my degree last spring. Online at night while running the ledger. I walked across a stage in a gown I bought myself, and I shook a hand, and I received a diploma that said I was a Bachelor of Science in Accounting. It took me 15 years, it cost me more than money, but it is mine. My name is on it, my signature, my work. I live in a one-bedroom apartment now. It has a window that faces east, and I wake up to light that doesn't come through a garage. I have a car, used, reliable, paid in cash. I have a savings account with an emergency fund. I have a credit score above 750, which feels less like a number and more like a pulse, proof that I am alive and whole and finally free. My father is living in a rented room somewhere in Florida, last I heard. He works part-time at a call center. The pool is gone. The palm tree hat is probably in a landfill. I don't know. And I don't look him up. He is a ghost in a ledger that I have closed. Sometimes young people come into the ledger and they cry. They show me credit reports with their parents' shopping sprees, their parents' gambling debts, their parents' dreams bought on their children's futures. They ask me if it gets better. I tell them the truth. The debt can be erased, but the time cannot. You don't get your 20s back. You don't get the college experience, the first apartment, the carefree years that should have been yours. But you can build something from the wreckage. You can learn the language of the systems that hurt you, and you can use that language to protect yourself. You can become the person who helps the next one in line. You can own your name again. I am Jade Marie Patterson. I am 32 years old. And if you are reading this, maybe someone is using your name to buy things you will have to pay for. Maybe they are calling it love or family or necessity. Maybe they have convinced you that you owe them your future because they gave you your past. You don't. Your name is yours, your credit is yours, your time is yours. And anyone who treats you like a resource instead of a person does not deserve your forgiveness, your gratitude, or one more minute of your life. Protect your name. Build your ledger. And if they come asking for what they stole, show them the door. See you in the next story.